Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, a show that examines all aspects of sexuality, from physical to emotional to spiritual. Join our hosts as they discuss age-old questions, common misconceptions, and the latest topics surrounding sex. They'll tackle topics about sexuality from the complicated to the hilarious and everything in between. GSMC Sex Podcast is your show for all of your questions about sex, even some you might not have thought of yet.
Hello, and welcome to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast, the Sex Edition. This podcast is entitled, Don't Fake It. You're listening to me. We're talking about sex. Don't fake it. You hear about women faking orgasms, and obviously that would be for the gratification of the guy, to let him know that he has made her feel exquisite. Because, let's face it, some guys really get off on that. They really enjoy feeling that they have made their partner feel wonderful. And for those women who take it upon themselves to fake an orgasm, I mean, it could be because they just want the guy to finish and get off and just be done with it because they don't really enjoy it. And it makes it go faster because the guy could be Mr. Minuteman. But women, please stop. Don't fake it. Don't. If you don't know yourself and you've not had a great orgasm or something to that effect, then I could understand you playing the role. I could understand. I'm not saying that to do it. I'm just saying I could understand it. But for the sake of the guy, don't. Express yourself. Tell the guy, look, this is what I need. This is how I want it to go. Because that's what I want you as a woman really to experience your sexuality in a way that you enjoy it, you appreciate it. And given that there's lots of information out there, there's lots of things. I mean, there was a time in this culture when it was all about the guy and women being pleased. Well, that was sort of conversation, but women didn't necessarily feel as empowered to want to demand satisfaction or equal time. And I will say, as a man, it's more pleasurable to me to know that my partner, my woman, has had a great sexual experience than to realize that she's been faking it all this time. Because I think guys really do want to learn what it is that makes a woman happy. And when you give a guy the gift of your orgasm that he can experience with you, I mean, he can really feel like a champion. I mean, I'm telling you, it made me feel better to know that my woman was having great sex because of me. And, you know, I can't ever say that a woman has never faked it, because what's the story? What, women can fake it and you'd never know unless they tell you. Well, they could certainly get under your skin if you're having an argument and they say, well, you never made me feel good. Please, women, that really gets a guy in the, you know what. That's how you can really ruin a guy's spirit. You can really attack his ego if you say that you've never had an orgasm and you've just been faking it all along. So, guys, watch out for that one. When a woman throws that one at you, she could be doing it just to twist the knife. So be careful. Don't get her that upset. But back to the point. It has always made me as a man feel much more masculine when I know that my partner has really enjoyed the sex. And I've learned to have open, honest conversations. And now it started with the fact that I could be in the place of having the conversation, because I would say clearly, look, don't fake it. If there's something you want me to know, tell me what it is. We'll work on it and we'll get there together. So sometimes for women, this is, and guys, I want you to understand this, but sometimes for women, it has to do with their comfort level and not necessarily about your ability to perform. But some women could feel uncomfortable actually having sex. And one of the ways in which they deal with that discomfort is just to pretend that they enjoy it. And oftentimes women who are inexperienced, or lovers who are inexperienced, they fake a lot. Their inspiration could come from conversations that they've had with other people. It could be because of things they've read. It could be maybe they've watched a lot of porn and they just imagine that this is how it is supposed to go. So what happens? It's this scene that's been created in their minds, and they just go along with it, not really having a good sexual experience, not even knowing what it is. But if you're faking it, which is what we're talking about here, then that's what you really want. Let's put a halt to that. Let's bring in some knowledge about yourself, what it takes. And it could be, now this could be the beginning of, this could be a new beginning for you. And I encourage you to take that challenge. Find a partner that works with you, somebody that is attracted to you, somebody that wants to be there, and you can experiment with some things. I highly encourage you to do that, because having a sexual relationship is supposed to be fulfilling, but you do that because you're willing to be vulnerable, you're willing to learn, you're willing to listen, and you're willing to share. And when you can do it, just take it slow, take it bits and pieces at a time. Then it's the journey of self-discovery. I mean, it's just as important to do this as if you were taking on a new exercise routine, or going to yoga, or taking a class in college, or learning to drive, whatever it is you do. Make it a priority for you. And then it's sort of, you can take the mystery off of what sexuality is for you and be in conversation with yourself about it, what you expect. I mean, certainly the interest can be there. We talk about it. It's part of what we do as humans. Sex is as natural as breathing for human beings. Then and therefore, it's okay for you to own that experience or desire to want to learn more. Now, I know that for a lot of people, there are so many taboos around sex that it becomes one of those things that feels like it's insurmountable. And for those people that have that experience with it, I'm sorry. Sometimes there are a lot of things that can get in the way. It could be a cultural thing. It could be a religious thing. It could be, those types of obstacles can make it very difficult to have an adult conversation about it. But what I have experienced in talking to adults, and especially those even that have a very, let's say, background in religion, and I'm going to say that respectfully, there are counselors who can talk about sexuality and how it pertains to your belief systems and make it very natural, very special, very sacred. And you can get past some of the hangups that some people have. And a lot of it, I would say, is just lack of knowledge. And it takes a lot of courage to admit to oneself that this is an area that you have difficulty in. So with that being said, don't fake it. Accept who you are, embrace who you are. And when you do that, I think you give yourself permission to be curious. And that offers you an opportunity to learn something about yourself. At whatever age you are, whatever age, because one of the things that we find that happens to people is they've done things for such a long time, a certain way, and they feel like they're too old to learn. I'm going to say men or women, you're never too old to learn something. So take this as my invitation to explore. There are books, there are tasteful books, there are tasteful videos, and there are things for people of all age ranges. And for what it is, give yourself permission to be you. You can reinvent you at any time. And this is like a jacket. If you like it, put it on. If you find that it doesn't work for you, you can always take it off and put it back in the closet. But I believe once you get the idea that you're giving yourself permission to learn, you'll probably keep that jacket on and continue to learn more and more about yourself and feel freed up. I'm going to take a break. and I'll come back after this.
Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Hello, and welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast, the Sex Edition. And it's entitled, Don't Fake It. And you know what I'm talking about. Don't fake it. Hey, in this segment, I'm going to talk about women who have multiple partners. Now, this may sound like it's just a guy thing. And there's plenty of stories and plenty of jokes about guys who have other partners, other lovers. But we don't necessarily talk a lot about women who do that kind of thing. As if to say that women don't do it. They do it all the time. They do it all the time. And it's even more accepted that women can hide the fact that they've got a lover or multiple lovers much better than a man can. So that having been the case, we're going to talk about why. Well, I'm going to explain some things that I've learned. One of the things is obviously each guy has his own sort of personality, and it's what women are attracted to. No one person seems to have all the guy's traits, okay? Because women are more adventurous now, so they're much more willing to consider things that they hadn't done before. Now, I will preface this that when we talk about the sex part, practice safe sex, okay? So now that I've got that out there, I'm always endorsing that. Now, going back to why women would have multiple partners. It's because when you have grown up, when you have had experiences with people, you know that there are differences. There's not all guys are the same. Now, if you happen to be a woman who has dated a particular kind of guy, even you know that all guys are different. And it's about whatever the nuances are of that particular individual, whether he's attractive to you, if it compares to the other guy, another guy that, and you know, you can date a lot of people consecutively, or you can date them all at the same time and sort of weigh the differences and select that way. It's really all how you tend to do your learning. Some people even rate their lovers as a way of like a scorekeeper sort of thing. And now it's not something that I've done. It's just interesting to talk to women who have multiple partners. I didn't really talk about the fact of whether they share that information openly or how they answer that. And my guess is they probably answer it openly because in the conversation, I mean, I don't think guys are that naive as to assume that there's a certain kind of women that they're attracted to, that they're going to be able to lock it down. And I am thinking as a guy that there's a certain kind of woman who is very adventurous, is attractive to a guy, and is going to be attractive to a lot of different kinds of guys, a lot of men. So when a woman finds that she has that much attention, she may decide, hey, I don't have to settle on any one person in particular. And it stands to reason that with all those possibilities, she might just decide to say, hey, you know what? I'm taking it all on and I can decide from there. It may not necessarily happen for a long time. Not like being a serial dater per se. And what a serial dater is a person that dates, then the next person they date, and the next and the next. That's more of a sequential thing. But to be able to date them all at the same time, I mean, it's like keeping a lot of balls in the air, juggling. And the more you juggle, the more difficult it can be. So there are challenges with doing something like that, I'm suggesting. But it is not necessarily prohibitive. I think you can get beyond the point of actually learning about yourself and learning about dates, and you're just going out on dates. And, for what it is, some women have the luxury of being able to do that. But what it comes back to is having the option and deciding that that's what they want to do for them. And men are perfectly willing to provide that. I mean, think of the number of guys that are out there that are attracted to a woman, the same woman. And women know this. There are those women who don't seem to be able to get attention. And then there are the women who seem to be able to get nothing but attention, and they're beating guys off with a stick. And it's to those women that something like this seems much more attractive to, because they know that they've got options. And this doesn't have anything to do with monogamy or whether that is appropriate or inappropriate. It's just talking about why it is there. And like I said, they've decided not to fake it. They don't want to hide it. And having a lot of lovers and experiencing lots of different things, because a lover is more than just about sex. A lover is an experience. And by experience, I mean, you might experience going shopping with somebody. You might experience going to the beach with another somebody. You might experience going to the fair or riding roller coasters, taking trips, having great conversation. I mean, it's wonderful if in the end of your experiences, you have found someone that sort of embodies all of those things, and it might make life a little simpler. But until you get to that point, how you get there is often a matter of what method you choose. As I mentioned, the serial dater tends to do them sequentially, and that might work. But if you don't keep them all in proximity, you may wind up losing the best one, because if you don't keep in communication with that person winds up being out of the loop. And So it's a matter of personal choice. I think what you want to consider is, if you're a person who is dating somebody who potentially has lots of partners, and when I say a lot, I'm not even going to throw a number out there, but when you're not the only one, then you have to consider that you may not be selected. And as a guy, I think as a guy, I find that a little difficult, because if I'm the guy, I'm wanting to be number one. I'm wanting to be first. And there's only so much competition that I'm really going to allow, if any at all. So when it comes to me as a person, I know how some guys might react to that, and some might not be okay. But then there are a lot of guys say, hey, you know what, if she's going to do it, I'm doing it. And, if we meet up, we meet up. So that sort of balances the scale, so to speak. But when I think about it in terms of who has more opportunities, I would say a woman has more opportunities, because guys are generally always pursuing women. That tends to be the way it works. And for those select guys who tend to have female attention and they're constantly chasing, well, that's rare. That's not the norm, especially when they're younger. Now, as women get older and the pool of eligible guys tends to be smaller and smaller, women may become much more assertive in their way in which they approach men. And that's more of an age thing. But also, when you talk about women who are much older and have had more dating experience, and maybe even haven't been married a time or two, that their selection process, they're not necessarily looking to be tied down to one person in particular. And that there is a matter of their reasoning, because they've already had the long-term relationship. They've already had the commitment, and they've experienced that. And being freed up to just wing it, that's an experience all on its own. And that can be very, very attractive, especially to someone who has been saddled with lots of commitments and lots of responsibility most of their time. So, and attractive not just to the person who feels the freedom, but attractive to a man to be involved with a woman like that, because the woman is expressing herself, expressing her freedom, and just kind of says, hey, this is what it is. And you can either get on board with it or move out of the way so somebody else can. You see, that's pretty bold. And some men are attracted to a woman who can make a statement that way and be honest about it. It's honest, it's vulnerable at the same time, but that is what's sexy. Now, this is not for everybody, but we're talking about the women who tend to hang it out there that way and be themselves and unapologetic. I need to take another break, and we'll come right back, and I'll wrap this up. Stay tuned.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now, don't bother, what's hot on Netflix, and everything in between. That's GSMCpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is a podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast, the Sex Edition. And we're going to round it out. I've been talking about don't fake it. So in the first segment, we talked about not faking your relationship, your sexuality. In the second segment, I talked a bit about what it was like for women to have multiple partners. And I know that we make a big joke about men being non-committal and non-monogamous. But hey, I make a big point about women feeling the freedom to do just that themselves. And they say they're dating like men when they do that. Well, okay, I get the joke. But women have traditionally said that they could hide that better than a man ever could, because it's what women say they can do. So I took it from there, but I had talked to women about some of the experiences they'd had in dating multiple partners and what the feeling was about it. Now, I didn't necessarily get too far into the sexual aspect of it, but we can imagine that they are also trying that out too. I just didn't have time to ask a lot of questions in that because I wanted to take a random sample and then get the feedback. But the response was actually interesting, and I've sort of compiled what I would think is an overview and discuss that in the second segment. So in this segment, I'm going to talk a little bit about men. And like I said, this isn't necessarily terribly new, but I tend to like to explain things for people because there is a lot of perceptions. There are explanations for things that I think are just low-hanging fruit, and people just grab at it and run with it, and it's overly simplistic. And to kind of stop there, I think does it an injustice. We talk about monogamy in relationships, and basically, a monogamous relationship is a relationship in which you have just one partner, and where that satisfies people, it works. But when it doesn't, then there tends to be this mismatch when you have a person that wants to be monogamous and then the other partner isn't. And then they find out they're not. And then there's all this drama that goes on around it. Well, it's mostly in a case like that, it's about the dishonesty. And people get surprised by what they discover, and that creates a lot of drama. But that having been the case, I'm going to talk about it anyway. And I'm going to talk about it from the standpoint of a man and why men oftentimes have multiple partners. It isn't just because they want to have sex with a lot of different women. I mean, yeah, that could be part of it. But let's think about one of the things that I explained about women. It's about experiencing different things with different people. Now, we put a lot into finding the perfect partner, that being a person that embodies all of these characteristics and traits that makes them the perfect individual. Well, you know what? That usually, when you find out those things, and I'm not saying it's the experience for everyone, but a lot of people, when they find out the things that they find out about an individual, if they think they're the perfect person, that's usually a snapshot in time. That's not just like an on and on and on and on forever thing, because people change. There are things that change about individuals. Opinions change. You know, you get new information. You learn things about yourself. And you've heard of the old expression, you know, people grew apart. Well, you know, that happens in a relationship. People grow apart. So where at one moment you may be totally happy with something, but then because of, you know, whatever we experience in life, you know, those things tend to move. And it's in that kind of experience in life is why people tend to have lots of different partners. I think they're searching for themselves. I think they're trying to find something that they like, and it gets mirrored in that other individual that they tend to meet. Women, say, for example, like to meet a guy who seems to have all his stuff together. He's got lots of money, he's powerful, he's sensitive, he's sweet, he's poetic, good looking, all of those things. But how many people embody all of those things? Really, when you find them. And I think guys oftentimes try to do the same thing. What guys oftentimes do is they get caught up in the shallowness of how they're behaving rather than doing the deep homework, which is really more self-reflective than it is on the external. So right there's a contrast, and it doesn't necessarily excuse anything, but it sort of explains why we do some of the things the way we do them. We're often searching, and we don't all have access to psychiatrists, psychologists, and great books or great parenting or great teaching. We tend to see things and then interpret them through our own filter. Whatever information happens to be in your filter at that time tends to be where we leave it. And for those individuals that take it a lot further, that really do the in-depth work, I applaud you, because it's there where you will find more satisfaction. You will find more resolve in being able to find your better half, so to speak. And by better half, I mean somebody that's more suited to the kinds of things that you can do together. Now, I'm all for people having great relationships. I'm all for people, but based on what you know about yourself and not necessarily what you externalize or what you project on other people, rather. So having that experience, having learned what you like, and then being able to express that to someone who finds pleasure in that, that's when you have real communication, real partnership. And you may find that in lots of people. You may find a community of people who share that same view. It may be a romantic way in which that gets explored. It may be in just having several friends that is explored, or that it's manifests. But however that is for you, it's really because you are learning about yourself in the process. And learning about yourself is a lifelong endeavor. Embrace that. You can never learn enough about yourself, and the more you know, the better you are. I'm John Johnson, and this is the Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast, the Sex Edition. And thank you for listening.
The GSMC Sex Podcast is a show that examines all aspects of sexuality, from physical to emotional to spiritual. Join our hosts as they discuss age-old questions, common misconceptions, and the latest topics surrounding sex. They'll tackle topics about sexuality from the complicated to the hilarious and everything in between. GSMC Sex Podcast is your show for all of your questions about sex, even some you might not have thought of yet. Download the GSMC Sex Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you can find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.